Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Komet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hi, Scott.
Hey, Jason. How's it going for you today?
It's going pretty well. It's kind of a bit of a gloomy day outside, but there's been a lot of soccer news to keep me occupied.
Yeah, I don't have air conditioning at my house other than a portable unit that we have in our bedroom. So I honestly welcomed the cooler temperatures today, although I was disappointed to leave my house and smell smoke again. So that was too bad. Yeah. But overall, I mean, it's definitely apparent that fall is right around the corner.
Definitely. If you are a new listener to the podcast, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about, Scott?
We focus on soccer in Calgary at the amateur, collegiate, and professional levels. We talk about the teams and players from Calgary's soccer community, from the grassroots and amateur leagues up to the university and professional level.
This episode, we're going to talk about the following topics. The breaking news about Goteh Ntignee's transfer. We'll recap the Cavs match last week against Pacific. We'll talk about their upcoming match against Ottawa and U21 minutes. We're going to talk a little bit about Kaylee Hunter and the U17 women's team. And then we're going to get into some U Sports. We're going to do a bit of a review of week one. And we're also going to do some interviews with representatives from the Dinos and the Cougars women's clubs.
So once again, it's another episode with a lot of diversity in terms of professional, amateur, post-secondary, and youth soccer discussion. So I'm excited to dive into it.
We pretty much had our list of topics all ready to go a few hours back, but that kind of got a little bit blown out of the water here because a few hours ago, the Cavs announced that Goteh Ntignee has been transferred. He's been sent to FC Annecy, I believe is the pronunciation, and they're a club in Ligue 2 in France. The transfer fee is rumored to be in excess of $500,000, and there's incentives potentially down the line. So it's a unofficial number, but it sounds like there's not a lot of denial about that. So it's a pretty tidy sum, and that would be a CanPL record to date.
Yeah, so this did come as a bit of a surprise today. And although listeners may recall a few episodes ago, we brought up Goteh Ntignee as one of the Cavalry players we speculated could be moving on pretty soon. Although we figured that Cavalry wouldn't really want him to go until after the season was over. But yeah, $500,000 is certainly a hard offer to turn down. I believe it was Oliver Platt who tweeted that figure out. So he's about as credible a CPL source as you can find. And yeah, I didn't see anybody disputing that number at all. Goteh Ntignee has been one of Cavalry's best players. He really made the left wing his own, especially after the departure of Jose Escalante. And he's been having a terrific season. So it isn't too surprising to see that he was on club's radar. And it is really good for the CPL that another talent is going to have an opportunity in Europe. Obviously, Cavalry's really going to miss his speed on the wing. I was curious about this club that he's joining. So I did a quick Google and saw that FC Annecy finished in 17th last year in Ligue 2. They're currently 1-2-1 this season after 4 matches. It's a good level, though. I mean, I was trying to figure out if any other CPL players have gone to France's second division. Sorry to put you on the spot, Jason, but are you aware of any who've gone to Ligue 2 before?
Yeah, that player for York, I'll wreck the pronunciation of his first name, but Abzi, like it was his first name starts with a D and then Abzi. He was in Ligue 2, I believe. I think his team was PAU. I think he's actually now moved on to Spain. I think they just moved him on here recently, but he played it there last year, I believe. So my impression was he did pretty well at that level, and he's essentially this move that he's gone to Spain now is would be considered a move up. So it's second division France, and I don't know. It's always hard to compare. How do you compare the third division in England against the second division in France or against the third division in Germany? I don't know how easily you do that, but I think it's safe to presume it's a good level. You got to remember there are teams in there that just got relegated from the main French league,
and it was funny. A former guest of the podcast, Sean Clark, he posted some images of the downtown core of the city or town that he's moving to, and it's just that quintessential charming European village looking city with the cobblestone streets and the cafes on the sidewalk. And he said, so this is where Ntignee is moving. I can see why he would want to go there. So I think from a lifestyle perspective, he's gonna have a pretty enjoyable time there. And yeah, you can't really argue with a player wanting to sample that kind of European environment. So congratulations to Goteh Ntignee. He's definitely earned this opportunity, but I think he's a huge loss for Cavalry, and I know we're going to talk a little bit more about why later on.
We're recording this on Thursday evening, and according to the CanPL website and their roster rules, the final roster freeze is tomorrow, September 1st at 5 p.m. I presume that's Eastern time. So you can't really arrange a transfer, but if there's somebody who is unsigned and you can bring them in as a free agent, you could bring them in and sign them to a deal tomorrow morning. So I guess it's theoretically possible that the Cavs could make an addition to fill that roster spot. I don't know if they will, but it's theoretically possible at least.
Could you think of anybody who would be a viable option in the Calgary area based on maybe their League One performances who didn't go to a university team?
If I was the GM, if I was Tommy on this one, I would probably add in somebody who is a U21 player. So just in case something happened and like Male Henry gets a red card or Male Henry hurts himself, that I have another potential option that I could plug some minutes in. Because I don't think you're going to find anyone that's going to be a real difference maker, game changer. But maybe there's somebody out there who, if you're in a pinch, could fill in a few extra minutes to put you over the hump there on that. But maybe some 20-year-old kid who played in the CPL in the last year or so, and maybe you just bring him in for that purpose only. That's my best guess.
I was wondering if maybe there's some players who haven't really found another team at the pro level since FC Edmonton folded, who wouldn't mind relocating to Calgary for a couple of months. But I think we are speculating here, and we should probably maybe wait and see what happens.
Oh, I just thought of a name, but I don't think he'd qualify for U21. What about Moel Gandor?
Yeah. So I think you said last episode he finished university. I don't know what he's doing at the moment in terms of his soccer. So he's one who's been around the Cavalry camp before. He would probably even know a couple of the players. He'd know Eric Kobza from games against the Dinos. So yeah, I think he's a viable candidate. The one I thought of immediately was Charles Nanat, who seemed had a fantastic League One Alberta season with Foothills, but of course I think he's at Trinity Western University, so he's probably committed to that team for the next few months.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty hard to pry away someone who's just gotten into their university season. But yeah, he would be a guy that would be intriguing for sure. But I don't think it's going to be a difference maker either way necessarily. But I guess I was just tossing it out there that it is possible that they could announce somebody tomorrow morning. One of the things about Ntignee leaving is he was one of the main people who was getting all the U21 minutes for the Cavs this year. So why don't we do our recap of where we're at for U21 minutes for the Cavs as a reminder of what the rules are. Each CanPL club has to have 2,000 minutes played by domestic U21 players. And as of this last game, through 21 of 28 games, the Cavs have 1,348 minutes. If you average that out for the remaining 7 games, they've got to average 93 minutes per match of U21 minutes.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Goteh Ntignee was the main kind of minutes generator for Cavalry's U21 players this season. He played 17 times, 8 starts, 9 sub appearances, and he accounted for 883 of Cavalry's approximately 1,350 minutes. So a considerable percentage was due to him alone. And if you look at the other U21 players they have and how many minutes they've played, it's a lot less, right? You have Michael Harms, who's played about 100 minutes. Mile Henry has played 178 minutes, although I do think he's going to be playing a lot more in the last 7 games. He's probably going to start almost every game and play 45 to 90 minutes. And then Garrett Smith-Doyle has been subbed in a lot, accumulating 10 to 20 minutes at a time. He's another one who I think is probably going to get a start at some point and maybe see 90 minutes here and there because, yeah, they're kind of running out of time to generate these U21 minutes.
And when you look at the last match against Pacific, Henry started, he played 63 minutes, and then Smith Doyle came in and played 16 minutes. So they got about 80 minutes in last week. They'll need to do more than that on a regular basis over the rest of the season to catch up on that. But yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of Henry, and you're right. Smith Doyle's going to get maybe a start or something like that. Or maybe we'll see Michael Harms again. As we talked about last week on the podcast, it's still likely pretty achievable to do, but they're going to have to really think about it. Like, it's going to be something that they're going to have to account for and plan for. It's not just going to happen automatically all by itself.
No, definitely not.
All right, well, let's get back and talk about that Pacific match that I just alluded to there a couple minutes ago. So this past weekend, it was the big matchup 1v2 at Spruce Meadows, and it was Cavs versus Pacific, and the Cavs were able to pull out the victory 1-0. It was decided on a penalty, basically. Scott, you want to talk a little bit more about the match and what you saw?
Sure. So, yeah, you mentioned the penalty. It was a really soft penalty, and dare I say, even a dive. I know that is what dominated the One Soccer panel discussion after the match. So what happened was a long ball was kind of pumped forward towards Mile Henry, and he was kind of in a battle for the ball with Kunle Dadaluk, who put an arm on him, and Henry went down really easily, and the referee called for the penalty. Now, the referee was standing pretty close to the middle of the pitch, so he didn't have a great vantage point of the contact. And from where he was standing, I don't think he could have really seen it very well. But I also don't think the ref was in the wrong position considering where the ball had been played from. So basically, to make a long story short, I don't blame the ref at all for getting this call wrong. I do think it of course drags up the VAR debate and whether or not that can be implemented in the CPL at some point.
I'll tell you from my own experience at the match, from where I was, which was not close to the actual infraction or possible infraction, it looked obvious to be a penalty from where I was standing and watching. But when you watch the replay, yeah, not so much.
We may as well point out Meyer Bevan did score the penalty, and I think that was his first goal in quite a while, considering he had that multi-game ban a few matches ago. So another goal for Bevan. I can't remember exactly how many goals he's got this season, but he's got to be near or at the top of the scoring charts for the league as a whole.
This upcoming weekend on Saturday afternoon in Ottawa, the Cavs are going to play Atletico, and it's a place where Cavs do not get good results typically. Ottawa does seem to be their bogey team at the best of times, and in Ottawa, more so.
Right. I think Ottawa, as usual, is going to be a very hard team to break down, and they're going to rely on the counterattack to generate their own offensive chances. Fortunately for Cavalry in this instance, they do have a little bit of breathing room at the top of the table. So regardless what happens, they should remain in that position after the weekend, even if they don't get any points and Pacific does get 3 points.
Yeah, well, I looked at the table earlier today, and they're 4 points clear, but number 2, 3, 4, and 5 all are at 32 points. So even no matter what combination of things happen this weekend, they'll be ahead by 1 point, even if they lose and other teams win. But it's just crazy that you can have 4 teams that are tied for second place.
Yeah, I think it's awesome, though. It really, really makes for an interesting finish to the season, because every time I think a team is down and out, they beat a team above them in the table, and then all of a sudden they're not that far away. And right now it's culminated in this situation where, so many teams could finish anywhere in really the top 4 or 5. Yeah, and I think HFX Wanderers have climbed the table kind of quietly, and now they're way up there. So it's cool. It's one of the things I really like about the CPL is the unpredictability, and that has been really a theme all year long.
Definitely. Okay, I think we're going to move off the Cavs now, and we're going to move on to some other topics. And the first one I want to talk about was the Canada U17 women's team. They played a couple matches in CONCACAF qualifying in Dominican Republic. They played Dominica on Saturday, and they played Bermuda on Wednesday. They won both games. I believe the final score in the Dominica game was 21-0. And in the Bermuda match, it was only 9-0 for Canada. Canada wins their group and moves on to the next round. Calgary relevant point here is that Kaylee Hunter played in the first match against Dominica, and she scored 4 goals. And in the second match, she didn't appear. She was just on the bench. So good job for her. But 21-0 was quite the result.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like Canada had any interest in taking their foot off the gas. I don't know if that was due to goal differential being important or not. I can't see any other reason for really running up the score like that.
Let's move on to U Sports. So lots of U Sports stuff happening this past weekend. First thing I'll mention is actually non-Mount Royal and U of C stuff. Both Canada West players of the week were Calgarians, but neither of them play for Calgary-based schools. Grace Masala for MacEwan was the women's player of the week. She got 3 goals and 1 assist. 2 of those goals were game winners, both in extra time, and she broke the MacEwan record for career goals on the women's soccer team. And on the men's side, Sebastian Zitkowski of UBC scored 4 goals in 2 matches and got a couple of assists. And UBC, typically a powerhouse, and he kind of led the way. So a couple of Calgarians had really strong performances this weekend. And then we can talk about the Calgary-based clubs.
So Sebastian Zitkowski was playing for Callies in the AMSL this summer, and he won the AMSL's Golden Boot with 11 goals.
Okay, let's move on to what happened to the Calgary-based teams. And I guess the most notable thing is the Crowchild Classic. It happened at UC on the weekend on the men's side, and Mount Royal downed the Dinos 1-0. Abu Nezebu scored in the 87th minute, right, getting close to the end of the match, and that was the difference. And on the women's side, the Dinos, they had 2 matches at home, and they won both of them, 4-0 over Manitoba and 3-0 over Winnipeg. And the Cougars women, they were on the road. They lost 3-1 to Thompson Rivers University, and then they tied UBC Okanagan 1-1. Now, both of those matches were moved to the Vancouver area because of the fires in the Okanagan. So it was a little bit of a scramble to get those ones in, but it all worked out in the end logistically. But yeah, a loss and a tie for the Cougars women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Crowchild Classic on the men's side looks like it was pretty evenly contested, with the Cougars scoring a pretty late goal to repeat as victors in that rivalry matchup. That's the same score line that the Cougars won by last year as well. And it seems like the game played out pretty similarly in this year, with the Cougars scoring in the second half to secure a 1-0 win. The Dinos women appear to be picking up exactly where they left off after a very strong 2022 season under Diogo Raposo. So 7 goals in their opening 2 matches and no goals conceded as of yet. So very promising for that team. Yeah, the Cougars women on the road, difficult circumstances with having to travel farther than they probably expected to last minute. But I know you talked to their coach, and he said a lot about the start to the season. So I'll kind of let him take off from there.
Yeah, and that's where we're going to go with next for our interviews of the week. This week, we're going to preview both local U Sports women's teams. We're going to do an interview with Mount Royal head coach Tino Fusco, and we're also going to interview UFC Dinos captain Rachel Barlow.
Mm-hmm. Tino Fusco is another former coach of mine, dating back to 2009 or 2010, when he was coaching the NSA program at Central Memorial High School. And I think even back then, he was the Cougars women's head coach. So it's a role he's held for a long time. And he knows U Sports women's soccer inside and out. So it's a great source of information to talk about the league. And yeah, I know you had a good conversation with him the other day about the Cougars' first 2 matchups, as well as a few other topics, such as how U Sports and League One Alberta will coexist and a few other things. So I'll let him kind of take over from that.
Yeah, let's run that interview now. I'd like to welcome Tino Fusco to the podcast. Tino is the head coach of the Mount Royal women's soccer team. Welcome to the podcast, Tino.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so we're already into the season, and you had a couple of road games over the weekend. How did you feel the performance of the team was for the first couple matches on the road?
Well, I don't know if it was our best performance. Obviously, we didn't get a result in the first match, and we drew in the second match. We had some adversity going into that first week, obviously, with the change of location, with originally to play in Kelowna. That wasn't going to happen based off of the situation that's happening there. So we were bumped to Vancouver, and we had to adapt some travel arrangements throughout the week. But we did manage to get the matches in, and overall, it was an opportunity for the players to get some nerves out, to learn and grow in that first week, and we know we're going to be better moving forward.
Every year, the nature of U Sports, you lose players to graduation. Who are some of the players that we should be watching for to really be stepping up as leaders this year?
For my group, we have a couple players that will graduate this year. That is the natural progression. A couple of key players that we're expecting big things out of would be Katrina McFadden. She's a 8 goal scorer from last year. She didn't feature for us. She only featured for us in 22 minutes this past weekend. So that's part of where I think we can get a little bit better. Sydney Danielevich is another player that we expect good things out of. She's a 4th-year returning player. We also have another player in Athena Forlas, who's an attacking player for us. So we have some opportunities there. We just haven't necessarily found a rhythm in our cohesion quite yet. We still came into camp banged up a little bit from League One and Alberta Major League. So these players go from summer to university sport without a big break in there. So it can be very taxing on the player at times. So we're trying to manage that. And like I said, we'll be better as we get on throughout the season, but it's going to be a difficult go for us in the BC division.
Yeah, that was actually the next question I was going to ask. You aren't playing the Dinos this year, your traditional crosstown rivals. Is that kind of strange to be in a situation where you're not playing them like for the whole season?
Well, yes, this is totally brand new for us with how the schedule has been set. I think we're in year 8 or 7 of an 8-year rotation. So we were the last school to go over to the BC conference. And so this is our first of 2 that we are supposed to be there. Now, next year is next year, and the schedule may change again. But yes, it is different. We're not I'm not watching or I'm not scouting the Prairie teams that I would typically know a lot better. Now I'm digging a lot deeper into some of the BC schools that sometimes we haven't seen for 2, 3, 4 years now. So it changes a lot. We're pretty much swimming in water that we've never swam in before at times. So it's a new challenge, but we're up for that challenge.
Since you aren't playing the Dinos this year, and that would be kind of the obvious circle on the calendar match, are there any matches in particular this upcoming season that particularly have your attention?
Well, for us, again, our goal is to make the playoffs, and you need to be top 5 in your conference to do that, or your division, which is our specific division. So right now, we need to get points off of all our divisional teams, and that's our goal. And if we can steal points off the Prairie teams when we play them, that's great. But for us right now, we're trying to keep pace with the teams in our division, and those are the ones that are circled on my calendar to be at our best. Yeah, I know everyone likes a derby match against your local school, but for us, we have no interest in the Dinos this year.
The way the schedule is set up right now, if there was more teams, even it out and prevent this from happening going forward, because I was aware of this, but then I actually started looking at I started to notice the balance between BC and through the Prairies. If there was another team or something that could potentially even this out, or how does that work exactly?
Yeah, so the reason why we're in the BC conference is the BC conference, or the Pacific Conference, Pacific Division, I guess if I use the proper terminology, is they're one school short of having an equal divisional kind of table. So what happens is one of the Alberta schools, excluding Lethbridge, will go over to the Pacific Division every 2 years. So Alberta started it, Q, I believe, followed. Then it was the Dinos, and then it was us currently in our first year of 2. So that's the sequence. That's how it's been in our in our schedule in the last couple of years. There is talk of a change of schedule where it could be a little bit more regional. So that changes things again too, with how the schools look to set that up. But that hasn't been confirmed yet.
And I think you've kind of touched on this already, but I was going to ask about goals for the team this season. I think you mentioned playoffs is the primary goal.
Yeah, I think that's always our primary goal is the playoffs, because once you get to the playoffs, anything can happen. We were there last year and we lost in a match that took 7 or 8 shooters in PKs to get to a result. So the league play is really just to get yourself into that next seasonal play of playoffs, and then every game is 90 minutes of football where you have to be at your best and put the ball in the net.
I think I've got one last question, and something you did briefly allude to earlier about League One. When you start looking at some of the BC teams in particular that you're playing this year, a lot of them have really integrated a setup where they have like their U Sports team and they have a League One BC team, and they're very closely connected. I just want to know what you think of that model, and if you think that's a model that could potentially be on the Cougars' radar.
Yes, I think we have to be very careful with these frameworks or these models. We've had different models in the past, and the challenge with that is it becomes very, these players are being coached by university coaches in League One, let's say. So, there's no real change when they come to university. It's just an extension of a fall season, ultimately. So that's where it has to become very, you have to put the player safety into it too, because depending on how long they're playing, is there any breaks? What are they coming from? Those are all challenges with that. It's definitely not going to be funded by the universities in the summer. So that's an area there where you have to find some sponsors, some investors to manage that. I do think it's important that the players are playing at a high level throughout the summer, because oftentimes if they're not playing at a decent level throughout the summer and then they come into the fall, that's when they start to get injuries or they're not prepared properly. And our season it's about a 10, 12 week sprint, and there's really no time to prep. It's really just, recovery, match. And sometimes you're playing 2 matches. Oftentimes you're playing 2 matches a weekend. The key players that you're asking them to play 90 minutes on a Saturday and play 90 minutes on Sunday again. And it can be very demanding on those players. So I don't know if the model's great. I don't know if I have put a lot of thought into what those suggestions or solutions could be right now. My focus, obviously, in week 1 is to prepare my squad for week 2. And that's ultimately where we're looking to go. And maybe after the season, we'll sit down and see what's best for our program and our school. But ultimately, the universities are also talking about putting together a winter league. So something where we can play some more exhibition matches in 11v11 format. We have some facilities across our Canada West Conference. And now the question then becomes is just where and when are those happening? And that's something I'm looking forward to, because those players and athletes are still in school, and those are still under our umbrella. So that's another big key there.
Yeah, that actually sounds pretty cool, because I know when you look at the college level, they're playing futsal in the beginning of the new year, which is kind of an okay option. But yeah, playing 11v11 would be definitely something of interest for sure.
Yeah, I think our university league is pushing for that. Originally, futsal was thrown around, in the early days, but teams like Victoria, Vancouver, they get to play outside in the winter. So it wasn't a very attractive thing. Obviously, in the prairies, it's a little bit more because of the weather and the climate. But with facilities popping up now that are 11v11 format, although they are indoors, it's still an option for us to get out and continue to play and compete. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do, especially with our players, because again, we can manage their periodization. We can manage the load that we're putting on the players. It's a little bit more structured that way. When we send them off to League One in the summer, again, we don't know how many minutes they're playing, how often they're playing, how often, their training schedules. So they may come back to us as athletes, again, not in their peak. So, and primed for preseason and what have you. But it all depends. It all depends where the athletes are going for the summer and, which groups they're playing with and things like that. So it is a good opportunity for most. It is a good level. it's how does it align to everything that the universities are doing, and obviously League One has their mandate as well.
Regarding the whole idea of a U Sports winter schedule, would that be like a separate? You mentioned it being exhibition. Would there be some kind of competition of some sort, like within the Canada West teams, or I guess maybe it's a little early to know all the details yet?
Well, again, this is all hypothetical, but as the coaches are coming together, we're trying to put something together, whether it's a tournament format or whether it's just a bunch of friendlies throughout the winter. But we feel that our sport is considered a fall sport in U Sport. We train throughout the year with our players, and the challenge now is we're trying to find areas where we can get together in the winter and still continue to play some friendlies, some tournament play, some weekend play, something along those lines, where we're still getting the players together and playing, meaningful matches, ideally.
Thanks very much, Tino, for taking the time to do the interview. And we wish you all the best in this current season. And we'll be in touch probably at some point later on this season. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thanks to Tino Fusco for taking the time to do the interview. And let's get into the next interview here. And this one is with Rachel Barlow. She is the captain of the Dinos. I'd like to welcome Rachel Barlow to the podcast. Rachel is the captain of the UFC Dinos women's soccer team, and she is in her 5th year this year. Thanks for joining the podcast, Rachel.
Thank you so much for having me.
Why don't we start with talking about your first couple matches this past weekend? 2 matches, 2 victories. Happy with the performance so far?
Yes, absolutely. We were really happy. We had our home opener on Saturday, and we just wanted to come out with a bang this weekend and really make a statement for the rest of the season. And I think we did that, so we were really happy.
There are a lot of connections between the Dinos team and the Calgary Blizzard. Players and coaches, and you played together at League One, a lot of you. Do you think that helps get your season off to a quicker start this year because of playing like that, or compared to, say, other years, for example?
Yes, absolutely. I think that makes a big difference. I know me personally, that was one of the deciding factors in choosing Blizzards this summer, is I knew Diogo was going to be my head coach. And so I wanted to continue building my relationship with him over the summer so that it was strong going into Dinos. And I think that same theory worked with the players. Like, I know some of the players I worked with on the Blizzard team over the summer that I'm now working with Dinos. Just it makes all the difference that we've had a whole summer under our belt, and then we're just stronger together, like relationship wise and playing wise.
I wanted to roll it back to preseason a little bit because I was actually kind of interested. I know that you went down to the States and did a bit of a road trip to Montana. And what was that like? Like, I know the first game you played in Great Falls, and that was against, I think it's an NAIA school. But the second match you played University of Montana, which is a Division I NCAA program. What was that like as an experience? And what did you think of playing against an NCAA Division I team?
Yeah, I think that trip was very important. I mean, it's a lot of team bonding, the long bus hour ride there and back. So that's always good for team bonding. And as for playing the Montana team, I think it was a really good challenge for us because that was kind of the first hard team that we'd played together as a group, because we had played Lethbridge on Tuesday and then we played Providence on Wednesday. So Montana was kind of our first like big challenge. And I think we did really good as a team. Being challenged for the first time, we didn't fall back or we didn't, get mad at each other, turn against each other. I think we did a really good job of coming together and just finding what worked in that game and continuing to do that.
You did win that game, didn't you? I think
yeah,
I saw
we did.
Okay.
We won 1-0.
So I'm just a little bit curious, like, I don't know how much interaction you had with the players, but did they have any idea about what it would be like to have a team from Canada come and show up in their home field and win, even though it's just a friendly?
Yeah, we didn't interact with them too much. And I don't know really what they were expecting us to be like. I know the US season works a little different. So they head into season a lot sooner than we do. So I think maybe they thought, my Canada team has just started preseason, whereas we're almost at the end. So maybe they haven't gelled yet. So maybe they weren't expecting us to be as good as we were. But I don't know. I can't say too much because we didn't really interact with them.
Next thing I want to talk about was about the divisional matchups this year. So you aren't playing Mount Royal, which is kind of weird, don't you think? Like, I think it's very strange. I look through the schedule and I know that this year you've been divided into different divisions, but to not play them at all, it seems kind of odd, isn't it? Does it feel odd?
Yeah, it does feel a little weird just because they are the only other team that is in the same city as us. And we're used to having the Crowchild Classic, and that's always a big game that we get really pumped for. So I guess just to not play them at all this year, it is a weird feeling.
Since you're not playing the Cougars this year, are there any other matches on the schedule that really catch your attention? You kind of have circled on the calendar, so to speak?
I would just say McEwen, we always want to play good against them, and they always bring a good fight, and we want to bring a good fight against them. So I'd say that's the one gamer that catches our attention.
What goals do the team have this season? Like, what are your expectations about how far this team can possibly go?
I mean, our goal is always going to be national championship. We started very young last year, obviously, and I don't think we had a lot of expectations, but we did make it all the way to national. So I think this year we just want to continue building the relationships that we started last season and continue growing and just make it again to nationals. But unfortunately, we didn't win any games last year at nationals. So I think this year the goal is just make it even further than last year.
And what about for yourself personally? Like, it would kind of be obvious that, you know, you want to finish off strong this year and have a good performance with the Dinos. But what about your playing future? Do you have aspirations after your Dinos career to maybe take it to the next level, playing pro, waiting around to see what happens with Project 8? What are your thoughts right now?
Yeah, it's definitely up in the air. I mean, I love soccer. I've played it my whole life since I was 3, so I can't imagine it ending right after Dinos. I would love to go pro. I know like Talia and Montana, they went down to Australia to play pro, so that definitely piqued my interest. But also with the new women's CPL league coming to Canada, that also is kind of catching my interest. So I think it's still up in the air, but I definitely would love to continue playing soccer after Dinos.
The last question I want to ask you is kind of a bit more of a personal question, but when I was doing a bit of my sort of advanced prep work, I read the article about your trip to Uganda. So do you want to talk a little bit about the volunteer trip and that you did in Uganda and what it was all about? Because I understand it was kind of soccer related. It wasn't just as simple as you're going there to, do volunteer work. It was kind of soccer specific.
Yeah, that was an amazing experience. It was over the summer and I went for 2 weeks, and it was with a program called Team Up Canada. And so we went to Uganda and we just traveled to different cities and towns within Uganda. And we played soccer with the kids at the schools and in the community. And we just tried to implement a soccer program because they really don't have anything there like organized games or practices or teams, anything like that. So we just tried to start a soccer program there and we played with the kids in the community. And yeah, it was a really amazing experience.
That does sound like a pretty cool experience. I'd like to thank Rachel again for taking the time to do the interview with us today. And I wish you all the best in this upcoming season and beyond. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks to Rachel for joining us on the podcast. And Scott, what do you think of those interviews with a couple of prominent members of the Dinos and the Cougars?
I really I found that tidbit that Tino mentioned about possible Canada West indoor 11v11 games super interesting. I think that's a great idea that should be pursued, and it's time to pursue it. I think one of the biggest advantages the West Coast teams have held over the Prairie teams over the years, and this is possibly a factor why BC teams tend to always win the Canada West Conference, at least I know that's been the case on the men's side, is their climate and the fact that they can play outside year round. So it would be really cool to see 11v11 indoor games throughout the winter come to fruition in the Prairies division. It makes a lot of sense. And I think it would be a much better alternative than playing the other indoor variations we have to kind of settle for in Calgary throughout the cold season.
Yeah, I never really contemplated this until he mentioned in the interview, but I think that something like futsal, for example, is a complete non-entity in BC. So although something like that might have some level of appeal on the Prairies, I think that if you're one of the soccer programs in Victoria or on the Lower Mainland, you'd be like, why? We can play outside 11v11. So I kind of understand why there would be the appeal. And of course, obviously playing 11v11 would be the ultimate. And yeah, with, the new dome over at Shoaldice and with the Foothills facility, and these facilities are cropping up other places as well. Edmonton's got the Scottish Dome, and I think there's something in Saskatoon. I'm not sure exactly what, but I think they've got something there. So it is a real possibility now where things could happen. And I think that it must be more a matter of when than if, because it sounds like maybe some of the issues are going to be more about what would the nature of the competition be? Would it be a tournament? I know he mentioned the possibility of playing exhibition games. I personally like the idea that you're competing for something. Now, whether that's a separate winter season or some kind of tournament format or something, just think it'd be good to be competing for something, but I guess we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'm okay with the idea of exhibition games, even if it was just 4 or 5 from November until March, and then after that point, you can start preparing for the men's or the League One outdoor seasons. But I remember when I was involved in university soccer, I was very surprised at the end of the U Sports season that the program pretty much shut down. We did have men's teams compete in CUSA, but that was 1 game a week and one kind of practice on Fridays every week. And it just wasn't enough soccer at the time. I think the university programs have come a long way since then in Calgary, and the players do train quite a bit throughout the off season, but the opportunity to keep playing 11v11 is something that should absolutely be pursued.
Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can subscribe to this podcast by using all the usual podcasting platforms. Head over to our website at yycsoccer.com with more info about how to subscribe or to leave a question or comment. And you can also follow us on Twitter at YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.